It's hard to imagine the world today without Google. Before September 4th, 1998, finding what you were looking for on the internet was nearly impossible. Billions of searches occur on Google daily. What we don't know, we Google. Along with Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, and Facebook, Google is among the big 5 companies in the U.S. tech industry. Yet, unlike these other companies, few people know the revolution's geniuses.
We try to focus our company on creating great user experience. I don't measure my success in sort of dollar terms.
Larry Page and Sergey Brin are among the 10 wealthiest people in the world, with a net worth of close to $100 billion each. They are the masterminds behind Google. The company that started as a novel search engine now manages 8 products with more than 1 billion users each. Many people use Google software to search the repository of human knowledge, communicate, perform work, consume media, and maneuver the endless World Wide Web. In the early days of the web, searching the internet was rudimentary. Yahoo and AOL existed, but the fashion for search engines was links, links, and more links everywhere. Before you could Google it, you would have to search the dictionary, grab a thesaurus, or search through the phone book. Initially known as Backrub, Google began as a research project of Larry Page, who enrolled in Stanford's computer science graduate program in 1995. Page was born in Michigan in 1973. His parents were both computer experts. Following in their footsteps, he studied computer engineering at Stanford University. Larry was an inventor, introverted, and completely fascinated with computers. Sergey Brin was born the same year in Moscow, Russia. His mother was a NASA scientist, and his father was a math professor. He and his family emigrated to the U.S. when he was 6 to escape Jewish persecution in Russia. California in the early 90s was the land of opportunities. In the heart of Silicon Valley was the home of legendary tech names like Apple and Microsoft, where great minds meet and miracles happen. It was the place to be for aspiring tech entrepreneurs. Brin had volunteered as a guide of sorts for potential first years, students who had been admitted but were still deciding whether to attend. His duties included showing recruits the campus and leading a tour of nearby San Francisco. Page, an engineering major from the University of Michigan, ended up in Brin's group. It was hardly love at first sight. Walking up and down the city's hills that day, the two clashed incessantly, debating, among other things, the value of various approaches to urban planning. Sergey is pretty social. He likes meeting people, Page recalls. Contrasting that quality with his own reticence, I thought he was pretty obnoxious. He had firm opinions about things, and I guess I did too. We spent much time talking to each other, so there was something there. We had a kind of bantering thing going on. Page and Brin may have clashed, but the two were drawn together, two swords sharpening one another. When Page showed up at Stanford a few months later, he selected human-computer interaction pioneer Terry Winograd as his advisor. Soon after, he began searching for a topic for his doctoral thesis. It was an important decision. As Page had learned from his father, a computer science professor at Michigan State, a dissertation can frame one's entire academic career. He kicked around 10 or so intriguing ideas, but found himself attracted to the burgeoning World Wide Web. Page conceived a system that would crawl the internet to determine which pages were linked to other pages, positing that it could lead to the creation of a new kind of search engine. Page came up with the idea to use backlinks to help rank websites based on relevance, reliability, and user feedback. They would search the web for new content and patterns. The ranking system rewarded links that came from sources that were important and penalized those that did not. Backrub was complex. It demanded substantial computing resources and also required complicated mathematics, which is where the prodigy Brin came in. In 1996, they began experimenting with the Stanford homepage and soon came up with the PageRank algorithm. This ranking system would become the foundation of Google search. Now they had their winning formula. The pair wanted a name that would be as grand as their vision. Inspired by the vast number of links between pages and how their search engine would only become more accurate and useful as the web continued to grow, Page and Brin renamed their company after the mathematical term Google, a 1 followed by 100 zeros. In August 1996, Google was created. It was a hit on the Stanford campus. Their dorm room had quickly turned into an office and programming center. However, Page and Brin weren't sure they wanted to start running a company full-time. During Page's first year at Stanford, his father died. He saw finishing his PhD as a tribute to him, but he also was inspired by him to go on to try something new. Brin was also reluctant to leave the program, given his academic upbringing. Brin remembers his advisor told him, "Look, if this Google thing pans out, then great. If not, you can return to graduate school and finish your thesis." Brin chuckled, then added, "Yeah, okay. Why not? I'll give it a try." Ultimately, they both decided to drop out of Stanford to focus on their new venture.
At Google, our mission is to make the world's information accessible and useful, and that means all of the world's information, which now in our index numbers over 1 billion documents. And it's an incredible resource. I mean, in history, you have never had access to just, pretty much all the world's information in seconds. And we have that now, and to make it really useful, you have to have a good way of finding whatever it is that you want. And that's precisely what we work on at Google. And my hope is to provide instant access to any information anybody ever wants in the future.
Investors were skeptical of the new company. At the time, there were 5 search engines. They thought, why would the world need a 6th search engine? In 1998, they got their first check of $100,000 by Andy Bechtolsheim, a co-founder of Sun Microsystems. Ram Shriram and 2 other investors, Jeff Bezos, Amazon.com founder, and David Sheraton, a Stanford University professor, finally agreed to invest. Together they raised $1 million to help Google get off the ground. It continued to receive several other investments, and a new one of $25 million was invested by venture capital firms. After that investment, Google Company was incorporated on September 4, 1998. Later that month, the duo moved out of their dorm rooms and relocated into the garage of their friend Susan Wojcicki in Menlo Park, California. It would be their first office, with a ping-pong table and bright blue carpet. In 1998 and early 1999, Page and Brin attempted to sell Google for $1 million to Excite, Alta Vista, and Yahoo, but to no avail. With no buyers in sight, Google began hiring. They needed to find first-rate engineers and people who could meet their high standards. The company's first employee was Craig Silverstein, a fellow PhD student at Stanford. The hiring process for Google has always been grueling, even from the beginning. Chris Sacca, a former Google employee, said it was one of the most intense in the world. He had to go through 12 to 15 interviews over a few days. It has become even more strict over the years. As one of the top companies to work for, the tech giant receives more than 1 million applications yearly. The hiring rate is less than 1%, which means there is a greater chance of getting into Harvard than getting hired at Google. From the beginning, Page and Brin always wanted the best of the best. In March 1999, the company moved into offices at 165 University Avenue in Palo Alto, home to several other noted Silicon Valley technology startups. After quickly outgrowing 2 different sites, the company leased a complex of buildings in Mountain View.
Sergey will hopefully show up these lost somewhere.
We're now recruiting for height.
Yeah, it's like crane.
Being CEO now, dessert is all. Oh no. It is a music show.
That big purple chair
By the dawn of the new century, Google had attracted a loyal following among the growing numbers of internet users who liked its simple design. However, the company was not making money. Page and Brin were initially reluctant to turn their site into an ad-selling machine. Unlike other search rivals, Yahoo and AOL, their homepage was clean and efficient. They did not want to clutter their homepage with pop-ups and ads. The focus was on building user trust. No ads meant no revenue. The company wanted to find a way to incorporate ads without frustrating their audience. They made them small, no flashing or popping up on the screen. They were discreet. It seems familiar now, but back then it was revolutionary and led to the search engine's success. Money moved in, and by September 2000, their revenue exploded. With its tremendous growth, they still needed to hire an experienced CEO to run the place. Seeking so-called adult supervision for the company, Eric Schmidt, who had an engineering background, was hired first as chairman and CEO, taking over from Page. They met Schmidt at the Burning Man Festival and 50 other future employees. Page then became president of products and Brin the president of technology. The duo's greatest strength was their ability to complement each other's talents and have each other's back. They would still be the creative minds and play integral roles behind the scene. But from then on, Schmidt would be the company's face and leader. As Google continued to evolve, its rivals slowly faded into obscurity. The early 2000s would prove to be significant and defining years for Google. Before Google became a verb, Yahoo was the premier internet search engine. As Google began gaining popularity, it became Yahoo's search engine provider in 2000. By the summer of 2002, Yahoo tried to acquire Google for $3 billion. But Google reportedly turned down the deal, as it felt it was worth at least $5 billion. Google went on to launch Google News later that year. a content aggregation service that would change how digital media was published and distributed on the web. Today, Google and its parent company Alphabet have a market cap of $840 billion. On the other hand, Yahoo sold to Verizon in 2017 for, ironically, just under $5 billion. By 2003, the company had outgrown offices in Palo Alto and other nearby Silicon Valley locales. Google leased a complex of buildings at 1600 Amphitheater Parkway, which was then known as the Amphitheater Technology Center, owned by Silicon Graphics in Mountain View, California. The move was designed to accommodate Google's more than 1,000-person workforce at the time. They called it the Googleplex.
And demand for what Google does has swollen its workforce to over 1,000 strong, the pick of the crop of America's geeks and nerds. In the company canteen, the food is free and supplied by the caterer who used to cook for the rock group, the Grateful Dead. Yes, this is a very hip place to be, and almost nobody looks over the age of 30. Every few years, a company comes along which tries to change the way we do things. I'm thinking about Apple Computers or Microsoft. Well, now Google is trying to change the way we work, the way we shop, the way we lead our lives. So it's no wonder this place is so full of energy and enthusiasm. Wouldn't you be excited if you were onto something big?
By 2004, Google was on the fast track to the top of the tech industry. It was the global go-to search engine.
I liked the service so much that I just wanted to have it around, and I really didn't have a clue of how they would make money, but I figured that something that valuable had to be valuable.
In the coastal resort of Santa Cruz,
Take care.
internet surfers wouldn't use anything else. In fact, all over the world, 140,000 Google searches a minute, profits from advertising estimated at $100 million a year. Internet cafes like this one, Googling away.
What do you use it for?
Well, if I have any kind of question whatsoever, regardless of what subject it's related to, I'll start by typing that question or some keywords from that question into Google and see where that takes me.
So has it changed your life?
As much as anything computer-related can change your life.
And Google's entered the language, as Xerox and Hoover did before it.
The person that I'm seeing before we went on our first date, I Googled him just because I didn't know him very well and wanted to sort of see if he was a criminal.
In 2001, Google employee Paul Buchheit started work on an email product designed to address the company's increasing internal communications and storage needs. Buchheit, having worked on earlier web-based email in the 90s, decided to build a faster, more responsive client using Ajax, then a nascent set of web development techniques that would allow the product to receive information from a server without having to reload the entire page. On April 1, 2004, Gmail was launched to the public with 1 gigabyte of storage and advanced search capabilities, dwarfing the limitations imposed by popular competing email products of the time, many of which offered just a few megabytes of storage. The release date led many in the media to speculate it was an April Fool's prank. It was not. Google linked to 3 billion web pages, and their partnership with AOL brought them 34 million new customers. What was the next step to bring it to the next level? It was time for Google to float on the stock exchange. The company's web advertising products made it hugely profitable. Google priced its stock at $85 a share, giving it a $27 billion valuation after raising close to $1.7 billion. Soon, the company expanded even more with Google Maps, Google News, and Google Earth. They had finally built a reputation, and their bold ideas had worked. Google made it into dictionaries as a verb, becoming part of our culture. However, they were struggling with privacy issues with Gmail. People didn't like that their personal information was recorded so that ads could be targeted. Their "don't be evil" philosophy was questioned for the first time.
What Google's trying to do is to target stuff particularly at you. So whereas spam emails are blanket targeted at everybody, they don't care who you are, they just want to say the same thing to everybody. Google are doing the exact opposite, which is to say, rather than sending something that's not specific to you, they want to tailor things that are exactly identical to your profile.
One of Page's most precise visions was the rise of mobile phones.
Now, you can see why Google's moved into this market. Last year, online telephony raised more than $3 billion worldwide, but now that's expected to rise to just under $8 billion by 2007.
Smaller internet providers have already started to take traffic from the big existing telephone companies, mostly in the international area where the savings are greatest. What Google's going to do is bring that service to a wider audience. They're going to make it much easier to use because it's going to be an integral part of the sidebar on their portal. And in addition to that, I think most importantly, it's going to be open. So you don't have to have everybody on Google to be able to call them on the internet telephony service.
And he quickly went on to buy a small startup called Android in August for $50 million. He did so without telling CEO Schmidt. Page believed this move could help the company enter the mobile software market. Of course, Android would become the world's most popular mobile operating system. After outbidding companies like Microsoft, Viacom, and Yahoo, Google bought YouTube for $1.65 billion. The deal was mutually beneficial for both parties. Google won the war on online video traffic, and YouTube, barely a year old at the time, gained access to Google's hefty resources. However, the two remained in separate offices. Google's headquarters were in Mountain View, and YouTube stayed in San Bruno. The acquisition has proved to be one of Google's most instrumental, as YouTube has ballooned into a cornerstone of modern culture and online life, creating entire industries and kickstarting the careers of countless creators. In 2007, Google began to clash with another one of the largest tech companies in the world, Apple, who launched the iPhone in January and was a phenomenal success. Brin and Page announced their Android operating system with various mobile phones a year later. Their longtime idol, who is now a rival, Steve Jobs, slammed Google for entering the phone business and accused them of trying to one-up the iPhone. In May 2007, Google wanted to create something that had never been done before. They came up with a new ambitious feature for their Google Maps webpage. Street View was an attempt to photograph every neighborhood on Earth. However, the service involved taking private data from unsecured Wi-Fi locations, and people didn't like the idea that themselves or their homes could be photographed from the outside. Many people found their privacy to be compromised. Google declared that people's faces would be blurred and that they would make sure no one could be identified.
We showed some of the images to people on the very streets that were photographed.
It can be really invasive, and I mean, I think we live in an age where you can just get any bit of information from the internet.
Everyone has a right to his own image, in certain countries at least, so they should be allowed to ask Google to remove this at the very least.
You've got the geospatial technology. What about a bit of common sense now? I mean, fancy taking photographs of people being arrested and using it in this way.
The car's picked up tens of millions of images, and in the vast majority of cases there's absolutely no problem whatsoever. It's entirely to be expected that one or two strange scenes have been caught, and we've seen some of those today.
But fancy photographing the exterior of a sex shop, for example, or people being sick in the street.
Well, it's not. The cars go round and they pick up the images as the cars drive up and down the street.
Google hired several Mozilla Firefox developers, and together they made Chrome for Windows, which later came to other operating systems. It was still a beta version, but already had sandbox tabs for faster and more stable browsing. Google made a 40-page comic explaining how Chrome worked to go along with the announcement. Over 4 years, Google's browser has become more popular than Firefox and Internet Explorer. 10 years later, Chrome is now the world's dominant web browser, with around a 60% worldwide usage share. And it's the most significant driving force keeping Google's search more relevant today than ever. Apple wasn't Google's sole big rival. There was also Microsoft. Bill Gates even declared that he saw Google as one of his most significant competitors.
The breadth of our research and the incredible people that we have really lets us do big advances in software. It's great to have Google out there. We have other areas like tablet PC or media center. We don't have competitors who really stayed in those things. So it's really pushing us on the internet search. We enjoy that. Fear's not the right word, but the value of competition and the enjoyment and the visibility that brings, that's great. We've had competitors at every stage of our history. And so when new competitors come along, it's great for consumers. Internet search, I can guarantee you, will be far better even a year from now than it is today. And that's because both Microsoft and Google will improve the search, and in fact even take some of that advertising revenue and give that back to the end user, because it'll be way more competitive than it is right at the moment.
Both were ruthless and hungry for success. As Microsoft got slower over the years, Google made a place for itself in the internet area.
Microsoft faces enormous challenges from the likes of Google, the very nature of computing changing away from the desktop-based software pioneered by Gates to email and spreadsheets delivered via the internet.
Microsoft has gotten slower over the years, and there are other companies like Google, for example, that are, making their name a name for themselves in this new era, in the internet era.
With success comes the inevitability of making enemies. Around this time, Google faced yet another challenge: Mark Zuckerberg. The arrival of Facebook blindsided Google. It began to pass Google as the most visited website in the world. The company announced 500 million users in July 2010. Half of the site's membership used Facebook daily for an average of 34 minutes, while 150 million users accessed the site from mobile devices. A company representative called the milestone a quiet revolution. The rise of Facebook marked a shift in how people use the internet. Its sole use in the past was to gather information. As the web evolved, its users were now sharing information, organizing their lives, and connecting with friends. Google's efforts at social networking had failed. Google Wave and Google Buzz had been discontinued. Google Plus was their attempt in 2011 to challenge Facebook. According to a 2016 book by a former Facebook employee, some leaders at Facebook saw Google's foray into social networking as a serious threat to the company. Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg instituted a company-wide lockdown, signaling that employees were supposed to dedicate time to bringing Facebook's features into line with Google+. Features included the ability to post photos and status updates to the stream or interest-based communities, group different types of relationships rather than simply friends into circles, a multi-person instant messaging, text and video chat called Hangouts, events, location tagging, and the ability to edit and upload photos to private cloud-based albums. However, they failed to understand customers' wants and needs. There was already a platform like Facebook that connected different people. Google Plus wanted people to share everything: their emails, tweets, photos, videos, and thoughts. But that's not what people wanted. According to one statistic, 90% of user sessions on Google Plus were less than 5 seconds for the social network. This tells a story that Google Plus failed to understand users' needs and wants, which is where user-centered design could have helped. Google made its largest acquisition ever on August 15, 2011. they bought Motorola Mobility for $12.5 million. That same year, there was an unexpected Silicon Valley shakeup. After 10 years, CEO Eric Schmidt announced that he was stepping down from his role to let Larry Page take over, as he was finally ready to take the reins. Schmidt tweeted, "Day-to-day adult supervision no longer needed." However, Page suffered from a health condition that would riddle his leadership. In 2012, he was struck by vocal cord paralysis, making it very difficult for him to talk, especially to large crowds. Consequently, as his voice became increasingly quiet and hoarse, he started skipping calls and slowly eliminated all public speaking events. Over the next few years, Google continued to innovate. In 2009, Google entered one of the most exciting industries in the coming decades: self-driving cars. Over the past several years, the industry has multiplied, with many big tech companies getting behind the concept. In 2010, Google rolled out a fleet of 7 Toyota Priuses. The hybrid cars had been outfitted with sensors and loaded up with artificial intelligence as part of the company's first crack at creating cars that could drive themselves. That effort would morph and evolve over the coming years and eventually become a standalone business known as Waymo. A technical revolution is coming, and Google is one company that plans for the future and adjusts to the world's evolution. A lot of weird experiments dominated the early days of Android. Companies like Motorola's Droid line, Samsung's early Galaxy phones, and HTC's Evo devices all, in theory, ran the same Android software. Still, Google's design was often buried under ugly and confusing skins and lackluster hardware. Enter the Nexus 1. It was built by HTC but designed by Google to be the ultimate showcase for what an Android device could be. And while the Nexus design has since fizzled out, that spirit has lived on in today's Pixel phones, which have seen Google assert itself in the mobile hardware space more than ever before. Alongside smartphones and web services, Google also began working on experimental hardware under the Google X and ATAP divisions. The most famous product is Google Glass, a wearable computer that augments information into your periphery, recorded videos and photos. To demonstrate the power of Project Glass, Sergey Brin showed off a live recording from a skydive at the company's I/O Developer Conference in 2012. The device became available to developers and a limited group of waitlisted customers, but not before it was criticized as a potential privacy risk, as several businesses began banning glass wearers from entering the premises. This constant drive for innovations and creations in different industries is an attempt for Page and Brin to show the world that Google is about much more than boring web products. But more importantly, they always try to find new areas where they can provide value to their customers. Google constantly adapts and changes based on what users want and enjoy within its domain. Perpetual improvement is the hallmark of its dominance. By 2015, the company was involved in an extensive range of various industries, and it was time, in Page and Brin's eyes, to shake things up. Page wrote, "Our company is operating well today, but we think we can make it cleaner and more accountable. So we're creating a new company." In August 2015, Google made a sudden shakeup to its structure. Alphabet was created and became the parent holding company of Google. As a parent company, Alphabet allowed Google to expand its domains outside of internet search. After the restructure, Page became the CEO of Alphabet, Brin became its president, and Sundar Pichai was named CEO of Google. In the restructuring process, Google ditched their official motto, "Don't be evil," and replaced it with, "Do the right thing." After Page and Brin stepped back, Google went through a troubling time as it came under more intense scrutiny. In 2017, Google was fined $2.7 billion for violating antitrust laws and manipulating its search result. However, this didn't stop Google from taking Apple's spot as the most valuable brand in the world that same year. Google's reach and influence in today's world is so categorically unparalleled in modern business that it's understandable that the company has faced several legal challenges over the years related to privacy and anti-competitive practices. But none were quite as forceful as this past summer's $5 billion fine from the European Union for alleged Android antitrust violations. The EU's regulatory body, the European Commission, determined that Google was prioritizing its own shopping service in ads displayed in the Chrome browser, which is preloaded by default on most Android smartphones. Although largely seen as a slap on the wrist that comes too little too late, the fine is part of a more significant realization from policymakers and the public that Google and its fellow Silicon Valley giants, Facebook and Amazon, may have long since entered into monopolistic territory. Just 1 month after the fine, U.S. President Donald Trump accused Google of manipulating search results to censor conservative news outlets. It's officially the end of an era at Google. As the company faced investigations and mounting employee unrest, both Page and Brin let go of the steering wheel and completely stepped away in December 2019. Sundar Pichai became the CEO of Google and Alphabet. This didn't come as a shock, as they weren't so deeply involved in the company's day-to-day operations. Page more or less disappeared off the face of the earth. Both he and Brin had hardly been seen or heard from in the past years. Both men have always been rather discreet. They could be two of a generation's most mysterious tech leaders, as they kept most of their private lives for themselves. Nonetheless, both are leaving a long-lasting legacy behind. In the space of a year, they both got married. Page married research scientist Lucinda Southworth in 2007 on Richard Branson's private island in the Caribbean. Branson was also his best man. Brin married biotech specialist Anne Wojcicki, the sister of his friend Susan Wojcicki, whose garage they started the company in back in 1997. However, in early 2014, a disastrous series of headlines revealed Brin's extramarital affair with Google Glass marketing manager Amanda Rosenberg. Following the affair, Brin and Anne would divorce in 2015. Brin married attorney Nicole Shanahan in 2018. Looking back at the big moments in both men's careers and how their actions have had a monumental impact, not just on the internet, but on society itself, we can see that what they have built will likely last for decades. Google has apps that billions of people use daily. It has grown from a startup to a technology giant. Although it has faced its criticisms, the company has defied the odds and continues to grow. It has had successes, but also failures. Nevertheless, even when it suffers setbacks, Google always manages to work its way back to the top. It has stayed true to its original mission, to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. Brin and Page could understand what the customers wanted. Without Google and their work, the internet and how we navigate it would look very different today. They have changed how we get information, and thanks to them, they've allowed us to ever expand our knowledge. From college dropouts to influential leaders, they grew a small startup from a garage into one of the biggest multinational tech companies in the world. It is easy to see how far it has come when we think about how Page and Brin tried to sell the company for $1 million to Yahoo back in 1999. Now it is worth near to $1 trillion. Sergey Brin and Larry Page built the search giant that shaped the world, one that humans simply can't live without.
Artlist.io